Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Now, today I have a very special guest that, let's be honest, I feel like turned up in my life at just the right time because, as you guys know, we've been transitioning from being digital nomads and living on the road and into our new place. And it took us ages to find our new home. And of course, all of a sudden, I'm reading about the art of surrender. So, Kute Blackson, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I'm sure that many of my listeners already know you or know your work. I know I've been following you for a number of years. But I would love you just to tell everyone a little bit about your story, who you are, the work that you do in the world, and, what is the impact that you want to have, and maybe a little bit about the legacy you want to leave.
Yeah, look, I was born in Ghana, West Africa. My father's from Ghana, my mother's Japanese. I grew up in London. I live in the US, and so I feel like a global citizen of humanity. From a very young age, I felt a deep calling to serve people. I remember being a little kid, and I would feel people suffering very deeply. And there was always a part of me that wanted to alleviate their suffering in some way. And so there was a deep desire to make a difference in some way. I didn't know what that would look like. And also as a young kid, I remember being a chubby kid lost in the crowd in Ghana, West Africa. And I'll never forget a moment that really impacted my trajectory, where I saw a crippled woman crawling on the floor. She picks up the sand that this man was walking on, wipes it on her face and stands up. And so you could call that a miracle. And so week after week, I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear, and people stand up at wheelchairs. And the same man would look at a woman who had crutches and say, throw your crutches away, or look at a man who was in a wheelchair, hadn't walked in 10 years, and say, stand up. And do you believe? If so, stand up. And so this man was my father. He was considered the miracle man of Africa, the spiritual teacher to presidents and kings and on, and a really great man, spiritual, we could say, teacher, authority in his own right. And so I grew up in this environment. And when I was age 8, my father threw me in the audience. He had 300 churches, 100,000 people, a huge church in London, about 5,000 people. So I get thrown into the audience, and my father says, speak. My son's going to give the talk today. And so that began my speaking career. Age 14, I started speaking, but age 14, my father also ordained me as a minister and announced I was going to be the successor to his spiritual legacy, so to speak, his spiritual organization. And so there were a lot of hopes and dreams and expectations on me at the time. And it was interesting, when I was 14, when it was announced, I knew in that moment that was not my path. I knew in that moment that was not my destiny. I knew in that moment that this was not what I was here to do. But I was too afraid to say anything to my father. My fear was, if I said something to my father, my fear was, if I spoke up, my fear was, if I dared to be who I was, my truth, myself, that I would lose love, I would lose his relationship, I would be outcast, I'd lose the community. And so I think, like many of us do, we end up betraying ourselves in order to get love and validation. And so that began a whole other journey, and I became a minister, and I went down that path, and for 4 years, dealt with internal turmoil and confusion and depression while serving people. And I got to the point when I was 18 when I had to make a decision. Do I go to university? What path am I going to go? I chose not to go to university. I wanted to go into the personal development field at this time. And I realized I could follow the expected path and take over my father's church, and age 20, age 30, age 40, age 50, age 60, be successful by everyone else's standards. But if I didn't have myself, if I didn't have my soul, if I didn't have my truth, if I didn't have my own essence, then what kind of success is that? And you can't be truly fulfilled and happy being someone that you're not. You can't be truly fulfilled and happy living someone else's life, or living someone else's version of life for yourself. And so I decided at 18 that I was going to have a conversation with my father, the scariest thing at the moment. I was going to own my truth, own my life, and tell him I'm not taking over. And I was terrified. We sometimes think that we have to get rid of fear and feel no fear and be fearless in order to take a step. And I was terrified, and it took a tremendous amount of courage. But I spoke to my father. He wasn't amused. We didn't speak for 2 years, literally.
Yeah, wow.
And there's also this idea that I think when you find your purpose, life just sort of spontaneously, effortlessly manifests, and the unicorns come out. No, sometimes when you find your purpose, that's when the challenges begin. That's when you have to face the challenges, or let's call them the soul tests, because those soul tests and challenges, force you to tap into parts of yourself that you didn't even know were there, force you to develop the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the psychological force and muscles to prepare you to fulfill your mission and your vision in this lifetime. And so I went through many challenges of trying to figure my life out. In that moment, cut a long story short, no family support, no father support. I remember being in a very dark moment of my life and saying to the universe, saying to God, you've given me, I felt like I had the dream of impacting people around the world. And I said, universe, you've given me this dream. And yet I feel totally abandoned by life in this moment. What do I do? If any, and I started reading a lot of spiritual self-help books from a very young age. And I said, if any of this stuff is real, then I need to know it works right now. And the next day, someone hands me a magazine called The Economist. I look at the back of the magazine. It says the American government's giving away 55,000 green cards in the green card lottery. I felt chills in my body. I knew that something was up. And I applied to the law firm. And to be honest, I knew I was going to win. And on the very last day of the notification, I was notified I won a green card. At that moment, I started to doubt, maybe it's not going to happen, because I was told, unless you're here by September the 6th, I think it was 16th or 18th, then just move on with your life. You won't be notified that you won't win. And so every day I go to the mailbox, visualizing and expecting, and nothing and nothing and nothing. So by September, I think the 18th, nothing again. And we get a phone call from the law firm I applied through. He's like, Mr. Blackson, you've won a green card. And I was celebrating and hugging my mother and jumping around in the middle of the night in London. Then I heard this voice that said, why are you so surprised? Did you doubt? You knew, so why did you doubt? And that's when I felt and I knew that there was a deeper intelligence at work. And that's when I really had the courage, the reinforcement of saying, okay, so long as I follow my truth, so long as I align with my soul, so long as I follow what's true in my soul, the universe will support me. The universe will support when I'm in alignment. And so I've just endeavored to do that ever since, and came to the US, 18, 19-year-old kid with 2 suitcases, $800 in my pocket, knew no one in the country, and began my journey, and I think it really started with, for me, the courage and the willingness to tell myself the truth, to really tell the truth. And I think one of the things that as human beings keeps us stuck, keeps us blocked, keeps us limited, are all the ways we lie to ourselves about who we are, about what we feel, about what we want, about what's true. As human beings, we stay in relationships that we know are not aligned, out of comfort, out of familiarity, out of fear. We work jobs that we know it's not the purpose for why we were born, just out of security, And so I think when we betray ourselves in that way, it impacts us, it affects us. And so I would just invite people to sit with, what lies am I telling myself? Really sit with the question. If you really want to shift and transform your life, ask yourself, what lies am I telling myself? And have the courage to acknowledge and tell the truth. To me, real spirituality isn't just chanting mantras and doing yoga and going to temple. It's the willingness to tell the truth to yourself about what you really feel. To me, truth is meditation. Truth is real yoga. And so what lies am I telling myself? Number 2, what am I pretending to not know? Because in so many ways, we play this game with ourselves of confusion. I'm confused. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know if this relationship is right. When deep down, we do know. We know, but often we're afraid of the consequences. Sometimes we're afraid of the fact that we have to take responsibility when we truly own our knowing. There's no more excuse. There's no one else to blame. Or sometimes there's a fear of truly owning that you know what to do, because if you really own that you know what the next step is, or you know what your purpose is, you no longer have an excuse to not take action. And so really sit with, what am I pretending to not know? What am I pretending to not know? And lastly, sit with, what are the lies that I'm telling myself? What is it costing me? What is it costing me? And feel that pain. many times we feel pain in our lives, but we deny it. We distract from it. We sex it away, drink it away, social media away, shop it away, busy it away, so that we don't have to feel the pain. But I just want everyone to really realize that the pain, if you feel pain, the pain that you feel is a messenger. The pain that you feel is a gift. The pain that you feel is something inside of your own soul trying to nudge you and show you where you're not in alignment. And so we have to embrace the pain as our friend, embrace the pain as an opportunity to course correct, to bring ourselves back into alignment, to bring ourselves back into truth. And so for me, that's what I did. I started to tell myself the truth and speak the truth to my father and those around me. And it took my life in a whole different trajectory. And so my dream was to impact people. My dream was to inspire people. As a young kid, as a teenager, 14 years old, I'd read these self-help books, and I just wanted to write books and see millions of people reading my books. And people don't know, but I would sneak into my father's church, because we lived literally behind my father's church, in an apartment behind my father's church. We didn't have a lot of money. We would sneak into my father's church in the middle of the night. I would sneak into his church in the middle of the night around age 11, and the lights were off, and I would speak. I would give seminars for hours. We're talking 2-3 hours a night, on weekends for 6-7 hours on a Saturday. I'd give seminars to the empty chairs, imagining souls around the world being inspired, being transformed. And that was my path. That was my journey.
I love it.
Yeah.
I just love it. And, for all my listeners, I just have to quickly let you know that Kute is a Splenic Manifester, of course. For those of you paying attention, you literally were talking your design. And one of the things that I love, like interviewing you, there's no, like the things I wanted to ask you about, you've already sort of touched on. It's like having a manifester on the podcast is so powerful, because one of the things about you guys is that you know who you are and where you're going, and you don't want to be told what to do or directed. And just to hear this story of you as a kid, like as a manifestor and as this soul came into this life to be unapologetically yourself, and the fact that you chose to face and be courageous and tell that truth is like what we talk about in my world all the time for manifestors. Like for all of us on the planet, we need to do it, but especially because you guys are here to inspire us into action. That's what you're on the planet to do, just from the really high point of view. But that I thought was really beautiful, because the first thing I wanted to sort of touch on is in the book, The Magic of Surrender, that I've just loved. You talk about a story when you were walking the Camino, and I walked the Camino in 2018. And I had a dude very similar to you question something, and so you tell this story about when you were walking the Camino, and at that time you kept attracting girls that were very jealous, and this person, like, he challenged you because he said, well, why do you want to have a jealous girlfriend? Like, why do you keep calling it in? And I think this is something a lot for my listeners. I talk a lot about it because responsibility is something that I bang on about. And, there are no accidents. And when we can step in, like you said, and take full responsibility, and this story really reminds me of that, like we're so blind to it sometimes. And I will often say we need to pay attention to the external clues, like what keeps turning up, because if it keeps turning up, it's in you. It's not out there. It's out there, but it's in you. So can you talk a little bit to that story and how you were very unconscious to the fact that you were calling in this type of partner? And as you went through that process, and you just, like, almost as I was reading, it was like I could feel you, like you cracked open the window. Okay, well, maybe this person has a point. If this person has a point, what would the truth be in it? And just listening to that unfold, or reading that, letting that unfold, was just such a beautiful expression of how we can be really blind to what's going on inside of us until we crack that window open of possibility. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think many times as human beings, we are very identified with who we think we are. We're very identified, we call this ego, right? We're very identified with this persona, this sense of self, this personality, this character that we are, that has been created from a very young age based on conditioning from our childhood to either avoid pain or get love and validation. So just set a context. We incarnate as these bright, amazing beings, and we meet our parents, and they're doing the best that they could do based on their childhood and their grandparents and their parents and society. And so we're born into this environment, and maybe there's abuse, maybe there's divorce, maybe there's alcoholism. So two things happen in terms of the creation of this sense of identification. First thing is we start to shut down, disconnect, and develop all sorts of defense mechanisms, right, to protect ourselves. And we erect walls inside and suppress our emotions. And then we also begin to become who we think we need to be in order to get love, validation, and approval. And so disconnecting from feelings, erecting all sorts of defense mechanisms, developing a persona, a mask, a role, a way of being in the world to get love, validation, approval. We become this person that gets reinforced over time. Every day gets screwed into a certain shape, reinforced, and it becomes who we think we are. We say, this is just me. I'm just this way. And so this creation of what we've become, we then identify as ourselves. Then we go through life trying to preserve that, protect that, keep that safe. And so we're all in that. The degree to which we're conditioned is the degree to which we're really not really free to choose. We think we choose in relationship. We think we choose in life. We think we choose in relationship. But if you look, if we're really willing to be honest and look at, let's say we look at our relationships, and you asked the question about relationships, you look at your relationships throughout time, you go, shit, what was I thinking with that person? What was I, was that free will? Like I chose, like, if we were really free, would we have really chosen that person? And the reality is we weren't really free. We were just living out the karmic, energetic, emotional, psychological conditioning of often our childhood, and we were playing that out, and we attracted who we attracted. And it often wasn't a conscious choice. Sometimes we were just attracted and compelled in a certain way based on our trauma, based on our pain, based on our conditioning, based on our relationship with our parents that was in our nervous system, that nervous system patterning. And so for me, part of that patterning was as a child growing up feeling the fear of abandonment, in some way, the fear of abandonment, my dad, my mom, certain subtle things that I picked up of, I'm going to be left, I'm not safe, and so there was always that thing. And so what I didn't realize, to your reference of the story, is unconsciously I had been attracting jealous women. And then, I was just always complaining to my friends, I'm pissed off, what's up with these women? They're always freaking jealous. And like, I was in this relationship with one woman that was like, I literally couldn't be in the same room with a woman without her commenting that I was trying to do something. And this was the opposite of how I actually was, And it got to the point where I'd be in a room and I'd be avoiding looking at another woman, and I'd still get accused of, you're avoiding looking at another woman. That must mean that must mean something. So I was in such a place. And so then I meet this guy on the Camino, and I was so tired and frustrated with jealous women and these women, and it was me just pointing and blaming. And this is what we often do. We defend, we judge, we justify, we blame. And that allows us to preserve our sense of identity. And so, which is why it can be so scary to face and tell ourselves the truth, because telling ourselves the truth about what we really feel often requires letting go of our sense of position, our sense of perspective, our way of holding ourselves. It can often feel like a death because it often requires letting something go. Yeah. And so this guy challenged me and he said, you keep attracting jealous women, there has to be some part of you that wants it. I'm like, fuck no, I don't want, no, excuse my language, but no way. Right. And I went full, like I just unloaded on him. And he said, because there's one common denominator in all of these relationships with you and these countless jealous women, is you. So what does that show you about yourself? And I think the willingness to take responsibility is the beginning of freedom. The willingness to stop blaming, the willingness to stop judging or justifying, the willingness to say, okay, if I keep attracting this, if this keeps showing up, what is this showing me about myself? What are these relationships showing me about myself that I'm not willing to own, that I'm not willing to tell the truth about? And so the truth really set me free, because I had to really acknowledge, like, if I keep attracting this pattern in my life, and for those listening, it could be anything. A man that doesn't commit to me, someone that abuses me, someone that is mean to me, someone that disrespects me, someone that's non-committal, fill in the blank. If I keep attracting that, what does that reveal to me about myself? What inside of me is unresolved with that? What inside of me is this showing me about myself? Or what inside of me wants this for some reason? And so when I was really honest, that's when I had to drop my defense mechanism of my ego and say, there's a part of me that actually wants to be with a jealous woman, even though logically I say I don't, but a deeper level of truth is I do, because if she's jealous, she's attached to me in some way. And that gives my wound, gives my ego the feeling, that little boy inside of me, a false comfort, because if she's jealous, she won't abandon me, because she's going to possess me. She's going to hold on to me. And so when I was willing to just tell the truth at that level to myself about what was going on, there was such a relief. There was such a freedom. And to me, that was the beginning of the healing, because that was the beginning where I said, wow, I'm actually insecure. I'm actually afraid. And I'd never been willing to acknowledge that I was the one that was afraid. I was the one accusing all of the women that I'd been in relationship with of they're insecure. But that was the first time when I stopped defending, holding my position, saying, I think I'm afraid. I'm the one that's afraid and insecure of being left. And it was because of that willingness to acknowledge that I was able to bring loving and healing to that part and those parts of myself, to that little boy, to that woundedness. But I'd never been able to bring healing to that part of myself and loving, because I'd been so busy denying. And so that's why I say the truth will set you free.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, it's something that I talk a lot about. I mean, my background is behavioral coaching. So I always talk a lot about, like, this projection is perception. You know, we need to understand that often people's behavior, we absolutely have to learn not to take it personally, 100%. However, we also need to understand that we have an energetic puzzle piece, and that energetic puzzle piece has brought the two of us together. So in that moment, we have to say, okay, so where is that in me, or where am I accusing myself of that, or where do I need to heal? And I think this is something that really, like you say, it sets people free, because we're ultimately taking responsibility. And I remember when I was doing my master coach certification, I had this opportunity. I remember one of the mentors saying, look, awareness actually is like 80% of the journey. You know, we talk models and we run people through all of these healing things, and we have all these tools, but awareness is the key. So really being able to give ourselves that opportunity to see the truth is half of the journey, or the majority of the journey. And I think that that's something, like you said, if we're willing to see the truth, this is really powerful. Now, the next thing that I wanted to just sort of talk about was the counterintuitive response that surrender is. And often you talk a lot in the book about the specifics of surrender. And I think that in itself is really powerful. One story that really jumped out for me was a story that you share about Lady Gaga, and how, you know, she's in this constant pain, and how she learnt that she just had to surrender to the pain and accept the pain. And it really took me back to a time nearly 20 years ago now. In my late 20s, I was diagnosed with depression and panic disorder. So I lived with depression and in a constant panic attack. And I tried everything. And I had that moment very similar to you, on my knees, screaming at the universe, like, what is the meaning of all this? Why am I here? And it was very clear to me then that this journey wasn't just mine, because now I know 20 years later, I would go on to help people heal everything that I experienced, and I healed. But there was this thing with anxiety that was a game changer. And that was that someone once said to me, after years of me trying to heal my anxiety, oh, just make friends with it. Like, just be like, Hey, old friend, how you doing? Like, are you here today? Are you? What do you want to tell me? What are you bringing to my attention? And that was the thing. I mean, yes, I was doing a lot of shadow work. I was reconditioning my neural pathways. I was doing it all, like all of it. But this was the thing that I felt was so powerful with my anxiety. And when you told that story about Lady Gaga, how she accepted the pain, all of a sudden the pain started to reduce. I had that same thing with anxiety. I would love you to speak a little bit to that, because it's so counterintuitive. Like, we don't go, what do you mean make friends with my pain, or accept that I'm going to be in pain, or accept that I have anxiety? Like that, like my ego or that part of me is like, no, I don't want to accept it. That's the whole point of this journey, to not accept it. So do you want to talk a little bit to that, how it's very counterintuitive, but the power of surrender in those moments?
Yeah, what I want people to get is acceptance doesn't necessarily mean you don't take action. Acceptance doesn't necessarily mean you don't find solutions. But I think if we're so busy resisting and resisting and resisting, we're pushing it away, that we're never really in relationship with something. And so I think one of the things that it's a very sneaky pattern that I think can keep us stuck in the sort of personal development work is we work on ourselves. I'm trying to change something. I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to heal that. I'm trying to get rid of that. I'm going to do this ayahuasca journey. I'm going to go to this thing. I'm going to do that therapy, just to get rid of that, to change that, to transcend that, to evolve through that, to heal that. But where the drive is even coming from is a profound non-acceptance. And where the drive is coming from is actually a subtle conscious or unconscious hatred of those parts of ourselves. And so whilst we're taking the right actions of modalities and healing and working on ourselves, it's laced with this underlying drive of non-acceptance. So even the journey of acceptance or the journey of healing is being driven by self-hatred. I want to change myself because I hate who I am. I want to change myself because I hate this part of myself. I want to change myself into something better, more like that, because this part of me is not acceptable. And that's energy of judgment. And the container of that is actually what's going to keep us stuck and prevent us from shifting the very pattern. And then people feel like, but I've worked on this and I've worked on this and I've worked on this and I'm doing this therapy and that therapy. But because the container is one of hatred or non-acceptance and self-judgment, then we end up reinforcing the very thing we're trying to shift. And so I think when we can realize that, it's like, because then it doesn't really matter what you do, you're always going to be in a loop. So then when you can realize that, go, okay, let me get into relationship with this. And that can be scary for people, because like getting into relationship with this means I'm going to be stuck here forever. But the challenge is we're still stuck here. You're still stuck there, just doing things to try to get rid of it, but you're still stuck there. And so this is a different way of saying, let me get into relationship with it. Relationship with it is non-resistance, is meeting those parts of yourself exactly as they are and holding them. And so the evolutionary process and the healing process and the therapeutic process is not coming from a place of, I hate this part of myself, but it's coming from and held in a greater context of compassion and a greater context of understanding and a greater context of healing. And that energy of acceptance and that energy of healing, that energy of acceptance is one of compassion. And that energy of compassion, more than just what you do, is what heals. That space of compassion, more than just a technique, is what heals, because technique carries the vibration of that compassion. And compassion, true compassion, is the healing element in any technique, in any technique. And so,
yeah.
And that's what really, I think, part of the surrender is. It's like saying, okay, this is here. Let me bring that compassion. And part of surrender is, I think, if you're in a situation or facing something, I think it's to also surrender to the lesson inside of that situation. If you're dealing with a difficult situation, difficult pattern, it's like, okay, it's difficult to deal with this situation, but if you can say, okay, let me surrender to, if I'm a soul and I'm evolving through life in a journey of growth and evolution, that means it's all about my evolution. And if that's the case, if I'm here to learn, grow, and evolve, and life is a school, an evolutionary sort of university, then everything is my curriculum. If that is the case, then if I'm going through something or situation or dynamic, then surrendering to what the soul lesson and opportunity is for why you're going through that can allow you to surrender whilst you're in that, so that you can go through it without resisting. Does that make sense? You can actually go through that without like, no, it's like, okay, I'm going to go through this. I'm in it. I'm going to go through this. This is part of what I'm dealing with. And what is this, my soul seeking to learn through this? And that's the surrender. When you can surrender to that, it shifts your relationship to the experience that you're going through. It shifts your relationship to the dynamic that you're dealing with, so that the dynamic still might be there, but your relationship to the dynamic can shift so that you can hold it differently, and how you hold it change it. When how you hold it changes, then you can go through it in a whole different way where healing can happen more naturally. And so, this phrase of like, the issue is not the issue, it's more your relationship with the issue, right? It's kind of like that.
Yeah. I love that.
And healing, is when you apply loving, compassion to those parts of yourself that are hurting. That's real healing.
Yeah, it's so true. And as you were speaking, two things came to me. The first thing was, because my work is coaching, and there is shadow work, and there is, belief work, and all of those things in there. One of the things I noticed, I'm going to say probably about 2 years ago, all of a sudden I was getting all these clients that were stuck in that loop because shadow work had become trendy almost. They got stuck in this loop of being like, well, it's in my shadow, I have to work on it every day. And I'm like, no. Like, where your focus goes, energy flows. So if you're constantly focused on what's inverted commas broken, because there's nothing freaking broken, that's where all your energy is going. And I think that is one of the challenges with personal development at the moment, because shadow work is so trendy, to the point where every time I would teach it, I would be like, we do the shadow work and then we move to gratitude, because we want to realign our energy. We want to realign our reticular activating system. We want to focus on what we want. We don't want to be, focusing on what's broken within us. And I think I love what you said. And, for me on my personal journey, one thing that I resisted and pushed away so many times was human design. Like, I was very scientific, results driven, like, no, you tell me how the brain works. And it took me a long time to see the correlation between things like science, quantum physics, and metaphysics, and go, all right, and start to open that door up. And one of the big lessons for me is that when I came back from the Camino, I made a promise to the universe, just show me. And I had resisted and rejected human design 3 times because I was like, no, I'm all about behavior. I'm in this mental space. Even though the spirituality in me was growing and just, enveloping me and had been there all my life, but I was resisting it. I picked up human design because I made a promise, because if, I was like, universe, show me. And within the 3 days that I got back from the Camino, like, the human design just kept smacking me in the face. And the irony is that human design showed me how much I was resisting my truth, because I didn't want to hear about my profile, and I didn't want to hear that I was this, and I wanted to be that type, not that type. And what actually happened was I stopped resisting it. I started listening, and everything with my business, it's not almost on my shoulders anymore. It's like, okay, you show me. And even my podcast, the way it was called something else, and very serendipitously, I changed the name of it, and it took off. Like, my podcast has a life of its own, as does my business. And that is because I surrendered. I did exactly what you were talking about. I was like, all right, well, my brain was really attached to me being, more like Tony Robbins, but actually I'm going to be more like, I don't know, someone else. So
in alignment with your nature. I
Yeah.
think that's so important. I think you hit the nail on the head. So many people, and I see it today, trying to be like Tony Robbins, trying to be like Deepak Chopra, trying to be like me, like you, like someone else, rather than in alignment with their own nature. And I think when you're in alignment with your own nature, then you're in your own flow, then you're in your own groove, then you're in harmony with life. And when you're in harmony with life, life supports itself through itself when you're in harmony. And so to me, that's the key. The relationship with yourself, the relationship with is more important than the thing itself. And so I think it's so important. I think in so many ways we have, as a culture, we've have this sort of outside in approach of like, oh, here are the 7 steps, and let me hack my way to enlightenment, to freedom. And so here's the 7 steps of what freedom looks like. And if I can talk that way and act that way and contort myself to be that way, then I'm going to be free and happy. But I'm not in my own integrity. I'm not in my own alignment. And so I think it's really surrendering that illusion, surrendering those identities, and saying, okay, I'm going to surrender to what I am. And so part of surrender is the willingness to let go of this idea of who we think we should be. We have this idea of, this is the person I should be, based on what we've been taught, and based on society, and based on religion, and based on the media, and based on, self-help books that tell you this is how you should be. Well, it worked for this person, worked for that person, but that person's not you, and there's never been a you before. And so part of surrender is the willingness to let go of this idea, this preconceived idea of who you think you should be, how you think your life should be, so that you can really feel what is organically, naturally seeking to express through you. How does life want to express through you in a way that is never expressed in humanity before? How does life want to manifest through you? How does life want to create through you? How does life want to podcast through you? How does life want to business through you? And to have the willingness, the courage to get in tune with your truth and nature, and feel that, and allow that process. To me, that is surrender. When we are living that, we're in harmony. And as I said, life supports itself when you're really living it. Life supports itself. And when life supports itself, because you're in harmony, that's when magic happens. I think for so often, we have this outside-in approach, living life from the outside in. But even in trying to manifest our lives, there's a sort of, I don't want to say mistake, but a limitation that we've been living that I really think in the last couple of years, life is evolving and busting us out of this old paradigm way of living, which has been about, what do I want? I got to manifest my life. I got to make shit happen. What do I want? But we never really asked the question, well, who is this I that wants? Because many times, even the goals and the dreams that we set, that we want to manifest, number one, yes, you can manifest a decent life based on force and will and making it happen and being from the outside in. It's possible, but it will often be limited in some way, because you're creating based on ego, you're creating based on identity, which is limited, which doesn't see the whole picture. And identity, personality, persona, ego is based in the past, is based in conditioning. So even the goals that you set based on this idea of who you think you are or think you should be is going to be limited to some realm of the past possibility that's been created from your childhood, from what you've seen, and there's going to be a limitation there. And so you might create from that place, only to then realize, what I thought I wanted is not what I really wanted. It was just what I thought I wanted based on who I thought I was, and it's not really true, and many times we get to that point. And so what is life seeking to express? What is life seeking to manifest? How is life seeking to express through me? And I think if you look at anyone truly great, anyone who truly had an impact, anyone that truly moved culture or society forward, Jesus, Buddha, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, Gandhi, Mandela, Mother Teresa, people that maybe you like or don't like, it doesn't matter. But at some point, they all had to surrender to their truth. They all had to surrender to what was authentic to them. They all had to surrender to this impulse of life that was seeking to express through them in a unique way. And I think that's when magic happens. So I just tell people, if you want more magic in your life, beyond what you can imagine, beyond what you could play, because we often think sometimes that surrender is weak, that surrender is passive, that if you surrender, you're not going to manifest your goals, dreams, or desires, that perhaps you're going to be a doormat, you'll be taken advantage of. If you surrender, you're going to get left behind. But I'm actually saying, if you surrender, what if you got more? Because you're in the flow. What if you got more? Because you're not trying to control life and force life and manipulate life to fit some limited idea of what you think it should be. I think that's when the beauty happens.
Oh my God, couldn't agree more. And again, you've just nailed something that I was just about to ask you about. So I'm going to get to that in a moment. I love what you said. I had a very similar awareness a number of years ago, where I was like, just literally sitting at my desk one day and I just dropped in, oh my goodness, I'm going external, then internal. I need to flip this shit. Like, I need to know who I am first and then go out there into the world. And that was like a dawning moment for me, because I had that, exactly what you were saying, that awareness, like, oh my God, we're all going out to discover who we are and applying all of these rules and all of these structures and all of these, like you say, 9 steps, and not getting the results and thinking there's something freaking broken. And there's nothing broken, but we're just looking the other way. And one of the big things for me, the thing that I teach and I talk a lot about, is becoming your own guru. And it's something that human design has very much taught me, because it's about really learning how to find your truth, your answers, your authority, so how you make decisions. And I think this is moving forward, this is our truth. Like, we have to discover our own inner guru, so that we aren't projecting who we should be dependent on who we are drawn to, or who we idolize, or what rules we're told to abide by. And I think that's such a powerful point. We've got to go internal, then external. But the thing I wanted to go ahead,
or just one piece in there, or if you find a teacher, right? And this may be a side note in the conversation, but I think it might be helpful to hear. I think if someone finds a teacher, I'm not against someone finding a teacher, but I think the relationship with the teacher is what's important, so that when you go to a teacher, you realize, and I try to facilitate this reflection when people come to my events and seminars. When you find the teacher, you realize that they are a manifestation of some aspect of yourself, not necessarily just separate, like, oh, they're so incredible. You're attracted to that teacher because they are a manifestation of some aspect of yourself that you are seeking to integrate and own and make peace with. And so then it's not just some separate thing that you're projecting out there, like, oh, they're me. And maybe I get to develop more into that, or embrace more of that, or make peace with that. But they're an aspect of myself. So that relationship is what's important. When we don't have that awareness, we project onto them, positive or negatively, and that's when we give our power away. And it's not a healthy relationship in some way.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that distinction. Now, I'm super aware of your time. I want to ask you one thing before we get to making sure everyone knows where to find you and get this freaking awesome book. But I wanted to talk to you about manifestation. Like, one of the big lessons that I've learned recently is stop freaking trying to manifest what you think you should manifest, and just surrender. Exactly.
That's the bottom line. Surrender, because often when we try to manifest, we tend to manifest based on the level of our own consciousness in a particular moment. And we tend to manifest, this is what I think, this is what I'm going to bring. And nothing wrong with that. It's not good or bad. It's just limited. And so we will tend to manifest and intend based on identity, which is limited to the past, which is limited from our experience. And so all I'm saying is, when you open to the level of surrender, it's not that you're passive and sit there and do nothing. It's not that you can't have intention, but when you truly surrender, you open to the infinite possibilities of life, truly infinite possibilities. Then when you open to the infinite possibilities of life, rather than projecting what you think should be, you're fully available to the magic, the infinite intelligence, the grace of all of existence flowing through you and manifesting through you in ways that you could not project plan. So you're no longer limited to your ego's, capacity. You're no longer limited to what you can even imagine. You're moving out of a finite game to an infinite game. And that's, I think, the beauty of surrender. And so does it mean you sit there and wait and do nothing? No, it means you can feel the energy of what you want to experience, more abundance, more joy. You can even set a goal if you want. But I'm just saying, don't get attached to that, because the moment you start getting attached to that and think it's got to be that, then you're putting a limitation on it, when maybe how life is going to unfold it is going to be way different than you could even imagine. If people think back, look at the things that didn't happen that you really wanted to happen, and look at some of those things that turned out better than you imagined. That's number one. Let's look at a relationship. Look at a relationship from the past that you so wanted to happen. You couldn't imagine not being with that person. Like, this is the one, this is the person, and you were devastated. But now you look back going, thank God that didn't manifest. Thank God, because we weren't able to see it in that moment. So often we're manifesting from the level of our own consciousness. When you surrender, you're not limited to what you can create by simply the level of your ego and your own consciousness, because your soul is infinite. And that's the question of, what does life want to express through me? What does life want to manifest through me? Attuning to that, aligning with that, then when you really are aligning with that, then moving forward, then strategizing, then planning, then intending based on what's true, without attachment, remaining open and fully available to life. So doesn't mean not setting goals, doesn't mean not, writing things down if you want, but it just means not holding so tightly to like, this is it, this is how it's got to look, where you're like, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm sensing, but I'm willing to not know how it's going to unfold. I'm willing to not know or pretend I think I know that this is what's best for me. So part of the most powerful prayers of manifestation is, universe, this or something better, this or something better. Or you can go straight to what I feel is like the highest, which is simply saying, which is what I would tend to say now, is like, universe, I invoke for the highest good in this situation. I invoke for the high. And when your attention is on the highest good, then you are invoking sort of infiniteness. You're invoking true availability to life. And that's when, if that's your intention, that's when what will tend to manifest will be the highest good. Even if you're not able to see, because the mind is not able to see the whole picture in a given moment. We can only see through the small lens and the prism of our identity. And so often things not working out or manifesting that can seem like a disaster in a moment, that doesn't make sense in a moment, is sometimes just grace. It's the blessing that we can't see right now, but it's often years later that we look back and go, I understand why that didn't happen, because that needed to not happen so I could have met my soulmate. That needed to not happen so I could have avoided that. Like, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I love that. And thank you so much. And it's definitely like the word that came up when you were speaking was, it's letting go of control. The mind wants control. The spirit's like, we don't need control. Like, uncertainty's our jam over here. Like, let's just be cool with that. And even for us transitioning, we were really set. We wanted to send our kids to Steiner School. We couldn't get them in. They've gone to the local school. They freaking love it. Like, my eldest son does surfing as a lesson. So I so resonate with that. And it feels so true that when we can surrender and let life move through us, I can feel the truth of it. Kute, oh my goodness, it has been so lovely. I could talk to you forever, but
thank you.
I must let you go. Can you let everyone know where they can buy your book, where they can connect with you on Instagram, site, your events?
Sure. It's been great being on. Thank you for holding a beautiful space. I want to invite everyone. I'm doing a very special event depending on when people listen to the podcast, on May the 7th. It's called the Reinvent Seminar, Reinvent Live online seminar, May the 7th. My paperback book is coming out. And so to attend the seminar, if you buy the paperback, you get to attend for free. To attend that event, simply buy the paperback. on Amazon. But you can go to www.kuteblackson.com/reinvent seminar. Find out all the information there. Just enter your receipt. Come to that event. You'll see me live. We're going to spend 3 to 4 hours diving deep and exploring how to reinvent yourself to that next level. You can go to my regular website, kuteblackson.com, find out about me, my work, Instagram, Kute Blackson, Facebook, Kute Blackson, my podcast, Soul Talk, which is a weekly podcast. Connect there. It's been great to be on.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Whereabouts is the event? What country are we talking?
It's an online event. It's online.
Oh,
it's
brilliant.
online. It's online. The event is Reinvent Live on May the 7th. It's online. It's virtual.
Amazing.
It's a Saturday.
Awesome.
Saturday, 9 a.m. I think 9 a.m. Pacific time on the west coast of the US. So kind of available for anyone, and so people can tune in from your living rooms.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, there's a lot of Americans that listen to this, so that's going to suit them, and all of us over here in Aussie land. We will also definitely love to join that. So thanks again for your time. It's been wonderful having this conversation. Thanks everyone for joining. It's been wonderful having you here, and I look forward to having you on the next podcast. Bye for now.